Food insecurity is a growing issue in Montreal, affecting more people than ever before. While food banks provide essential support, they are not a long term solution. Access to nutritious food, food education, and systemic change are all crucial in addressing the root cause of this crisis. In this conversation, I speak with Kim Fox, the Director of Programming at the Depot Community Food Center, about the realities of food insecurity in Montreal. We discuss the limitations of food banks, the importance of food quality, and how community engagement plays a key role in creating a more equitable food system. Kim also highlights the need for public and policy support to ensure fair wages and lasting solutions moving toward a future where access to good food is a right and not a privilege. To hear more on the topic, watch the full interview. Hi, Kim. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview with us. So, I first wanted to ask if you could please present yourself, your title, and your organization.
So my name is Kim Fox, and I work for the Depot Community Food Center. My title is the Director of Programming, so I oversee all of our programming.
Thank you. Can you please introduce the depot? Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, the Depot is a nonprofit organization. We are supported, funded in a variety of ways. We do a lot of our own fundraising through philanthropy and through grants. We get a small portion of our funding from different levels of government, and then we have some small social economy. We are primarily set up to work on issues of food insecurity. Um, our vision right now, our vision statement is a thriving and connecting community where nourishing food is accessible and realized as a basic human right. So when we think about the work that we're doing, we're trying to head in that direction.
Mm.
And then we kind of work under, um, I'm trying to think of which part to present to you. It's kind of complex at this point. We work under three or four big pillars of action that's based on our programming. So grow, cook, share, and mobilize. And I can tell you more about our programs after, but we have like three main impact areas that we focus on. One is serving immediate need in the community, and it's both food need and need that comes to people who are in food need. So other symptoms of addressing other symptoms of poverty. The other one is building community and long-term health. We really do our food security work with a focus on the long term and trying to help people now for later. And I can go into that more. And then also a piece about working on dismantling the structures that create food insecurity. So we recognize that food insecurity is a symptom of bigger structural issues, and particularly relating to issues of poverty. People are not food insecure because they don't know anything. They're food insecure because they don't have the means to provide food for themselves and their families. So we take a very holistic approach, but we don't want to take away from the bigger issue, which is really a money issue. And in order to dismantle some of the structures, we have to recognize what they are, the things that are keeping people in poverty, and work on advocating at the policy level for change. So that was kind of a long explanation of what we do, but primarily we're focused on people who are living in situations of low income, and we use food as this great galvanizer to bring people together to talk about um, human rights,
Mm.
and hopefully to make change in our community.
It's very interesting, honestly, very, very interesting. I did want to ask because you did obviously mention food insecurity being at the core of your work. So, how would you describe the current state of food insecurity in Montreal currently, from what you know and what you've seen?
Well, we know that the rate is really high right now. We know that it's about 25%. The most recent numbers, which I don't think at this point are adequate, is about 25% of people
Mm.
in Montreal living with food insecurity, and particularly in our area in NDG, which some recognize as quite an affluent area, but there are many, it's quite a large territory, and there are many pockets within it with very high food insecurity. In our territory as well, it's about 1 in 3 kids. I don't have current numbers of this, but I would argue that the numbers have increased quite dramatically. We know we've seen increased demand here at the depot since the pandemic, the past few years, and I imagine with our current um, state of affairs economically that the demand will only get higher as people
Mm.
are kind of pushed into situations where they can't make ends meet. They don't have much money beyond their housing and like basic needs costs. More and more people are skipping on food. It's one of the first things to get compromised, and so and here we see all different levels of food insecurity. We see people who are in very severe cases of food insecurity where they don't have enough food, so they might be compromising on the amount of food they eat, skipping meals, etc. So the quantity is not enough. And then we have other people who are compromising on the quality, the types of foods they get. We know that that's impacting long term health. So here, um, our demographic is it's kind of a mixed bag between working and unworking, but we see more and more right now people who are working 1, 2, 3 jobs and still having a hard time making ends meet. And um, so we try to create programs and services that to support those folks who are kind of on the edge, who maybe haven't fallen off into a place where they're really skipping meals or their home is sacrificed, but um, yeah, there's need out there. So anyway, we provide a wide spectrum of services, knowing that food insecurity does not look the same for everyone, um, and it's increasing.
Mm. Mhm. I know you kind of mentioned this before, and also just also I think it's an interesting aspect of it, saying that it doesn't look the same for everyone. There's different levels, right? But I was wondering, like, I know you talked about poverty, but what are some of the key factors that you have found are driving food insecurity in Montreal?
While rising housing costs, more precarious employment, so like what we call the gig economy, people working jobs that both don't have a high enough wage that allows them to live, or has kind of precarious conditions. It's much easier to get let go. They might not have benefits. They might not have days off. Um, so much more precarious work environment. Um, we have a lot of new arrivals. Um, it's very common for people who are refugees, asylum seekers, to experience high levels of food insecurity in their first couple of years in a country. So we definitely see that, and then we just see the people who are on social assistance for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's mental health, sometimes it's disability, sometimes it's addictions.
Mm.
Um, and that social safety net is inadequate. The money is barely enough to pay rents and ever increasing rents, and if they can manage to do that afterwards, there's no money left for anything. So people come to us looking for support.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So, as we had talked about prior to this interview, I know that for many, the first solutions that they usually go towards is food banks, and they have been a vital resource for many people. But they are unfortunately not like a solution to addressing the root cause of like food insecurity. So would you be able to kind of talk about this a little bit?
About why food banks aren't the answer
Yeah.
to food
Yeah. Yeah.
insecurity. Um, yeah, I mean, there's so many reasons. So the first thing I mentioned was really just that um, it's not the food, it's the money, it's the people don't have the adequate resources. So um, giving people food in the for the time being does not solve the broader issue that they're coming to through your door in the first place. The need is there, it's growing, and there's nothing behind the scenes happening to combat that need. Um, uh, we, as the depot, have transformed quite a bit over the last 10, 11 years um, to kind of rethink about the way we do food assistance. And like I said, in this more holistic fashion where we're providing access, but we're also providing social opportunities to kind of get involved with your community. Social isolation is a big issue for people living on low income. So food insecurity and social isolation often go hand in hand. Um, Another thing, and then something we've pushed on over the years is the quality of food that we're providing, and then the autonomy of people to make choices about their food.
Mhm.
So food banks traditionally are getting donations, um, and they don't have choice over what those donations are, and they're redistributing those donations to people. Um, Food banks were created kind of as a stopgap measure, and not only did they help solve kind of the issue of poverty at the time, or not solve the issue of poverty, kind of placate, band-aid the situation of poverty at the time, they kind of solved a problem for big food industry who had all this food waste they didn't know what to do with. So they could um, get rid of their food waste essentially, and it was distributed to community members. The problem with that is that the quality of food isn't healthy. It's not necessarily what people want or need to satisfy their food needs. So for us, quality was really important because we wanted to think about health. We wanted to think about, for us, dignity is a massive piece of our work that we try to keep considering and infusing into our work. So not only like options to choose what someone else might be able to choose at the grocery store, but also building kind of like a trust and an opportunity to be able to ask for what you need. So if you're not seeing what you and your family is used to eating in our programs, to be able to ask for it. Um, I just want to get back to your question because I could talk about this forever, but also one of the reasons that one of the issues with food banks is that a lot of people don't want to come to a food bank. There's a lot of social stigma attached to going to a food bank. And we know that only a small percentage, so if it's 25% of the people in the community, in our territory, who need our services, we know that we only have about 6,000 participants a year, individuals. So that's not even close to the amount of people who are living with food insecurity are willing to come through our doors. And we've done a lot of work to increase the number of people who feel welcome and comfortable in our spaces. But food banks aren't enough because people don't necessarily want to go there. There is a lot of social stigma attached to asking for a handout, even if we do our best to highlight the fact that it's structural issues that we're there's no judgment passed on people who are coming for our services. It's ingrained. So food banks are definitely not solving the problem. We can talk more about the types of. I imagine you have more questions about like the types of food and programming that we have, and I can get more into that
Yes.
after.
Yeah, actually, you did answer some of my next
Okay,
question.
thanks, Igor.
So that's great. And I do think it's very interesting to hear everything you have to say about this. So you just mentioned the issue with the quality of food, for example, that's being found in food banks. So what limitations do food bank systems have in terms of the quality and variety of food that is being distributed?
Great. So that was the question I was going to answer. Um, they they have a lot of limitations. So, but it's not insurmountable. So, because food banks are societally ingrained right now, they have a legacy of the way that they um, gather food and distribute food. Um, a lot of them are caught up in kind of the system that they already do. So, connecting with some of the larger food banks that are over the territory. In Montreal, it's called Montreal, the one here. And then there's these larger food banks all across the country, who provide food often to these smaller organizations. And then there's like individual donations. I'm sure you remember food drives from when you
Yes.
were a kid. And when I started here at the depot, we had food drives because that was the way, once a year we got together and we supported our community by giving some stuff from our pantry. Um, and a lot of food banks are run with volunteers. So there's not a lot of money floating. So, in terms of being able to decide on the quality of food, there's not much choice there. You're giving out what you're given, and you're dependent on those types of relationships to get the food that you want. So, for in our situation, why I say it's not insurmountable, we made some pretty conscious decisions about the types of food that we wanted to have and we wanted to be able to give. So important for us was to have fresh food because we know that fresh food is the most carries the most nutrients. We wanted whole foods for that reason. And we wanted foods that were minimally processed because we know that the higher processed foods carry more sugars, salt, preservatives, again, less healthy. We were still getting a lot of those foods from being donated to us. So we one of the first things that we did was to create kind of a fresh food fund. So we did some specific fundraising and earmarked it for fresh food. And we tried to slowly increase that over time. So while we still relied on donations for a long period of time, we also slowly started to build up this reliable stream of fresh food. And we started with things like milk, a little bit of produce, and eggs. Um, Also, coupled with that, like a space has to increase its capacity to kind of store food. So if you have fresh food or frozen food, you need to be able to have it for a period of time, and you need enough space depending on how many people you serve. Um, Another thing that was really important for us was consistency. So when people come to a food bank, and what we saw at ours, um, um, was this piece around lack of dignity because we were inviting people to come in our space and then wait and watch as others went ahead of them to
Mm,
get food. So there was a lot of anxiety, worry, competition, um, that we wanted to eliminate. So um, over time, as we built our fresh food fund, we would uh, both make sure we had certain reliable staples, and then we started to ask for specific staples as donations from our community members, so that we could guarantee that every time someone came in, they knew what they were going to get rather than waiting and just seeing what was available that day. Um, and then slowly over time, we ended up. Oh, and then another thing was just like we we ended up giving people food when they arrived. So we created this meal program that provided a meal made from fresh ingredients that we had at the food bank that day, just to kind of like reduce some of the stress and also to start like demonstrating what was possible with what you were getting in your basket that week. Um, and slowly over time, we managed to make change. So our donors were slowly influenced, and oh, another thing is we stopped accepting expired food.
Mm,
This is a
mm,
really big thing at food banks is that people empty their cupboards and are giving
yeah.
expired food. And though we know that expired food is not necessarily dangerous, there's a real lack of dignity and respect when we're giving people other people's throwaway goods, and we just didn't want any part of that. So that was something that we stopped, and then we started asking like for very specific things like rice and pasta and certain canned vegetables and things like that. So we slowly had influence over our community. Um, and then over time, we increased the amount of money that we were able to put into our fresh food fund. So we started buying more and more food. And we developed over time what we call our healthy food policy. And this was really like a set of rules that govern the way that we sourced and distributed food. So it talks about whole foods, fresh foods, where we were getting our food from, what we were willing to accept from the larger food bank, um, and it has helped us slowly grow our budget over time to change the way we're giving out food. Um,
Mm,
and then just one other thing I didn't mention was that we started with this process where people would go through and pick food off tables. They were allowed to pick a certain number of things from each table. Um, and we moved to a system, or we've slowly graduated through systems that gave people a little bit more choice. And now our food bank space looks more like a market, and people are given a certain amount of money, fake money, that they spend in the space as they see fit. So we still prioritize fresh, local, whole foods and culturally appropriate foods. So we have communities from all over the world. We're trying to make sure that we
mm.
have like the appropriate grains um, and produce, um, but they choose. That's big for us.
Perfect. So just kind of to reiterate, so well, not reiterate per se, but so food donations are not discouraged. It's just like being mindful of the food that you're.
We
Uh,
don't accept them anymore. We've stopped. So
okay.
I did forget to mention that during the pandemic, we used it as an opportunity. Another thing with donations is that you need all this storage space. So we
Mm,
used it as an opportunity to say, we're not taking any more food. We don't have the storage space. We want to transform our storage space into a workshop kitchen.
mm,
We
mm,
built a kitchen in the storage space, said no more donations, which takes a long time to be accepted in the community. A lot of, anyway, there is a legacy here. People want to donate. So it's a thing. We ask people for money and we tell them how far we can push their money versus when they're purchasing. Um, but yeah, they can't donate anymore. We do take donations from Montreal still, the large food bank, and a lot of donations. They provide a lot of food, but we only take food that fits within our healthy food policy. So it's
perfect.
fresh and minimally transformed foods.
Thank you. So let's say a Montrealer would want to help the depot's mission. I know you just mentioned, for example, being able to donate money, but what other ways can they support this mission, for example?
We have a lot of volunteers every week helping us run our two of our big programs. They're not our biggest necessarily, but helping us run our meal program, which we
Mhm.
run 3 times a week, and our food basket or marché depot program, which we run 4 times a week. Um, so there's lots of positions available, whether you're serving participants at tables, helping in the kitchen, helping in the market, lots of room. And then we have room for people to volunteer at some of our other programs, like our outdoor markets. We have after school programs for kids. We have community kitchens. There's lots of opportunity, but the primary opportunities are at our meal program and the Marché Depot, which is our basket program. But then again, I would say money. Money is big. We still receive a lot of our funding from personal donations from people from the neighborhood. It really goes a long way in ensuring that we're able to provide these programs. Um, we also, I don't know if this is worth mentioning, we're changing the model of how we run right now, and we're about to pilot what we're calling a community contribution model.
Mhm.
Because demand is going up so high for our programs and services, we want to help ourselves guarantee the sustainability of our programs. So we're asking people to give according to what they have on a sliding scale when they come for our programs. Um, so it's another way that people can give back. So people are participating in our programs. There are some of our programs are more universal than others, meaning that it's not only low income community members that are allowed to participate. And if you are participating, we encourage people to pay on a sliding scale, and we give more information about where they might sit on a sliding scale when they come. So that's another way of giving back. We ask participants who are using our services as well to contribute their knowledge to help develop programs. Um, and we have like what we call a guest chef program where we might invite participants to come work with our chef in the kitchen, and we pay them and they make the meal for the day. So it's like an employment opportunity. So there's lots of ways depending on your capacity to give back, and then spreading the word so that more people both get involved in the depot programs and services. And now that we're growing some of our advocacy work, get involved in pushing the government to both put more money in people's pockets so that they don't need food banks, and to support the existing food security um, programs in our community, which are um, catching the problem, so to speak.
Thank you. Um, Sorry, I'm looking at my questions again because I know we. Okay, so I would ask, how does the depot balance providing immediate relief while also working towards systemic change?
Um, that's really hard. The We've talked about making systemic change for a long time, and I think we're slowly infusing it. I think our healthy food policy goes a long way to making systemic change because it's demonstrating that it's possible, and it's saying loud and clear why it's really important to prioritize or to make quality food part of the conversation.
Mm,
You know, we say food is a basic human right, but we're not talking about potato chips. We're talking about nourishing, life giving food according to someone's wants and needs. So programs and policies like within the depot like that, I think go a long way because we're a larger organization and we're talking to other people. We're influencing um, groups like Montreal who are getting food, so influencing them to have a healthier food policy in terms of what they're accepting and giving out as food. I think that's important. Um, but then getting back to what I was saying about, talking a lot about doing advocacy work and systemic change and pushing for policy change. in order to do that work, you need to invest in that work. And I mean, you need to invest in like in staff resources. You need paid people, or you need to mobilize volunteers, but it's harder. It's easier said than done. It's harder done than said. Um, to pound the pavement, to gather people together, to do letter signing campaigns, to do media, to talk about the issues, to push policymakers to actually do something. And it takes a lot of work. So um, we just did a new strategic plan about a year ago, and in there we have highlighted this dismantling structural barriers as one of our key focus areas. So we've put resources towards it. So now we have several people working on it. We're working locally with other organizations and building coalitions who can do some of this broader policy work. And then we're also we're networked with a group called Community Food Centers Canada. And it's a network of um, people doing food security work in different ways. They're not all doing exactly what we do, but doing it across the country.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's close to 20 now of these food organizations across the country, and about 400 across what we call good food organizations. So it's not quite doing all the elements of what we do, but doing it as well. So we work additionally with those groups, um, pushing for policy change. So um, balancing the two is challenging and necessary. The other thing just to mention is, how do we bring our community members into these conversations? So we know that people who are living with issues of poverty often don't have that much time. They're busy. They have other things on their mind, and can't be doing this type of work full time. So we try to make activities that both get feedback and get people participating in advocacy work really easy. So,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, like letter signing, we do something with a couple of other organizations called Rethink Vote, where we get um, political candidates to come and we talk to them about, pushing policy change. We do information activities where we are, showing films about a specific issue, and then like bringing people to a march or bringing people to talk to a political actor about it. Um, so trying to involve people, but like where they're at without asking for too much time, without over asking of people who are already in difficult situations.
Thank you. And talking about involving people, I was wondering what are some of the ways the organization makes sure to empower participants to develop food skills and food knowledge?
Mm-hmm. We have a really strong, um, this term is controversial at our organization, but food literacy component
Mm.
to our work. And when we say food literacy, we don't mean that we are teaching people all about what they should be eating and how they should be eating. We mean that we facilitate um, knowledge exchange about food. So sharing food traditions, sharing food techniques, sharing food joy, um, and what else can I say? We're definitely like teaching skills, or people are definitely learning skills as part of our workshops, but it's less in the form of teaching and more in the form of trying to involve people in these food related activities. And lots of skills develop from that. So some of the impacts we're looking for are people learning about new foods, people learning, how to prepare those foods, learning, nutritional content of those foods, learning about different recipes that they could make at home, both simple and more complicated. People being able to cook more variety on a budget, things like that. We have many food literacy related activities. So, um, one I can mention is an after school cooking program for kids. We have a 10-week program for kids in grades 4 and 5. And we have a year-long session for teens, um, which is fantastic. You have kids coming out of there like with completely new relationships to food, and you know, having celebrated having shared their own traditions and skills. It's a really, really strong program that we actually do in a number of other neighborhoods in Montreal as well. Um, we have community kitchens across demographics. So we have ones for seniors. We have ones for more for families and new arrivals. We have ones for youth that are aging out of care, for men specifically. Um, and we have lots of garden programs, and our garden programs are really getting people into the garden, learning about different varieties, learning how to cook, moving their bodies. Um, and we're doing that in schools as well. Anyway, lots of food, um, whetting a lot of food appetites, let's say, or trying to get people excited about food and the variety of food, and just deepening knowledge and deepening, hopefully, people caring about their food, and also believing that they
Hmm.
have a right to quality food.
I'm curious, what has the reception to your work and your engagement with communities been like? What has it been like, people's like reaction to it?
People like community members who are part of our
Yeah.
programs,
Yeah.
all different, very strong. So we have a really strong evaluations um, element of our work. We think it's important
Mhm.
to evaluate in order to stay accountable to what we kind of say that we're doing. So we get a lot of affirmations regarding the positive change that we look for. So people increasing their confidence in the kitchen, increasing their knowledge of food, um, their their access has improved. They're able to eat more fresh fruits and vegetables because they participated with us. They've made new friends, and maybe they've met someone that they could count on in a crisis because now they're connected socially. Um, so we're asking a lot of, we've had a lot of good feedback, and um, it's not all good. There's definitely people who stakeholders, let's say, so sometimes it's funders, sometimes it's partners, sometimes it's participants themselves, who think that we are spending our money incorrectly. So there's a lot of push still for, why are you prioritizing whole foods and fresh foods and organic local foods, um, and why don't you just give more? Why are you hiring so many staff? Why don't you just get so many more volunteers to give out more food? People need more food, and quality shouldn't matter. And so we definitely hear that sometimes. And I mean, we have answers for it. We have reasons why we think there's value in it, but it's not everyone who thinks it's the right choice.
Mhm. Thank you. So how can the general public, I know you've kind of mentioned policymakers, but how can the general public and policymakers better support food justice efforts in Montreal?
Um, I mean, they can reduce poverty by giving people fair wages for their work, by supporting people who can't work, so increasing benefits for certain groups of people who cannot work. Um, I would start there. That's the first one. The second one is to really provide more core funding to groups who are we're providing social safety nets. So um, we're not the only social safety net. There's people that help with housing and people that help with legal things. People, help in all kinds of ways, different community centers and things like that. Um, but these groups are doing work to support communities who can't make ends meet and who are in much more difficult situations. So those groups need to be way more supported. I think there's a lot of work to do around policy work around this idea of food as a basic human right and kind of defining what that means. What food is a basic human right? The Canada Food Guide has done a lot of work. They've changed quite positively in like redefining what a healthy plate might look like. And I think it's a matter of policymakers to also look at that and say, hey, because it changes the bar. So right now our poverty line, I can't remember the number right now, is it's set at a certain bar. What is judged is how many people living below the poverty line. But if you look at the cost of living, housing, food, et cetera, there's way more people living below the poverty line than what is actually reported based on that. So um, I think we also need to be a lot more realistic about what the poverty line looks like, what meeting basic needs looks like. It's not just like subsistence living of someone eating rice every day and we think that, oh well, they're eating enough. They said they're eating enough, so that's okay. Um, so also investing in quality of life and something that we're working intentionally on right now is building our kind of territorial food system. So trying to make more place for food in the community and more place for accessible food. And because we become bigger as an organization and we have more leveraging power with our suppliers and with donors, we're trying to share it amongst other groups so that um, there's more resilience, we're more networked. But I think that particularly municipal governments should be investing in helping build the infrastructure and providing funding to encourage partnerships like that so that community groups are more networked.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I have lots to say about that, but a lot of investment can be done. But the first thing really is reduce poverty, and you reduce poverty by getting more money in people's pockets. So redefine what quality of life looks like, what the minimum looks like, because it would change things dramatically.
Thank you. So I know you just mentioned some of them, but what are your organization's next steps in fighting for food security?
Well, really, we're implementing our strategic plan. So we agreed on the strategic plan last June, I believe, and so that's making sure that we are balancing our resources between supporting immediate need, building community and long-term health, and dismantling these structural barriers to food security. Um, and some of the specific actions, I've mentioned some of them. One is like building our programs or making sure that people have access to our programs in more equitable ways because not everyone is in the same situation. Um, so that's this um, community contribution model. So a sliding scale for participation in our programs. It's one of them. Also, we're calling this train the trainer, but basically supporting our partners and other people in our territory to do the work. So sharing our existing resources and activities and materials with other groups in the neighborhood who are potentially, taking care of a garden, running an after-school program, um, who have like a women's program, so we can share food and stuff resources with them. Um, what else are we doing? Let me just look. There's a lot of things. Well, yeah, another thing with increasing, like supporting partnerships, is like increasing this infrastructure in our territory for more. Um, Here we're talking about third spaces a bit, so spaces for people to gather when they don't have money to go anywhere else. So beyond the food in the home, so we want more community spaces, and for us, community spaces always involve food activities. So that's something that we are pushing for. Um, and oh, our advocacy work, of course, like getting the word out there, getting more people talking about the right to food and what the right to food looks like, and to not negate our band-aid solutions, our band-aid programs that help people today, but to think more holistically about um, what food support looks like. What I guess it's that's kind of like food justice. Like what does it look like more holistically? So we are amping up communications. How do we talk about the work that we're doing, why we think it's important, and how do we get more people involved in this work, whether they're actually coming to for our services or not.
Thank you. So the next question, which is almost the last, basically the last one, it's pretty big, but what is your vision of a future where food insecurity is no longer an issue in Montreal?
Um, you're asking someone who's been doing this for too long. um, what is my vision?
Ideally, yeah.
Ideally, I mean, I think we need. I would love if we created systems um, of equity. I would love it if we could restructure society to where people are paid more fair wages across the board and where we respect a variety of types of work as important. So someone, our custodian, for example, is doing incredibly important work. We need them. um, and so fair wages for people that would help them to live without poverty. And then I really think it's about reconnecting at the territorial level, like connecting to your neighbors, getting together and building these shared spaces, and in the city, particularly shared green spaces where there's community activities um, that happen there. Um, I'm definitely really focused on food, and I think that food is such an amazing um, focal point. It's a gathering space for people, and particularly in Montreal, there's people from everywhere. And one common thing that we have is food, and it's a really amazing way to um, break down some of like the preconceived notions that we have about other people is through getting to know their food stories. So I think I think more places for food in the community and accessible food make a lot of sense. Um, what else do I have to say about that? I don't know. I can't really think of it right now. But connected communities, more green spaces, and more equality in terms of how people are supported with their wages,
Mhm.
their quality of life.
Perfect. Thank you. Um, is there anything I didn't ask you that you would like to discuss or add to the discussion?
Um, something. The only thing I'll say is something it's still in discussion here in terms of how we talk about it.
Hmm.
But something that has been important to my work here and to the depot's development is trying to create a space where people, even though you're asking for support, where you feel comfortable to ask for what you want and need. And we call it agency. the feelings of comfort that you'll be heard. Um, so I would love to see a world in which people, even if they were in low income situations, felt entitled to ask for the food that they wanted and needed. And I really hope that our programs can help expose people to some of that food that they might not otherwise have access to. So I didn't mention some of our markets. We have these low cost markets. I always want to have food subsidized while there is poverty so that people can taste and try and get to know things that they might not otherwise get to know at all. Some of these whole foods or see a vegetable grow or um, we take it for granted sometimes, but a lot of people do not have access to it at all. So for me, it's important to be able to, the exposure piece is important so that someone could come back and say, oh, hey, I want that. Why, why does this have access to that and not me? Um, Agency. It's something that we haven't, it's really hard. The word is not recognized when we
Mm-hmm.
talk about it, and we haven't even gotten to the crux of what we mean by it. But it's something along the lines of what I just said.
Perfect. That's it for me. So thank you so much, Kim, for this interview. It was a pleasure to learn about this, but also hear about it and hear everything you had to say and your work at the depot. It was really insightful. I really appreciate it.
You. Thank you for coming to interview people like us. It's good to get
Of
the word out.
course, of course.